Adiskide estimatuak. Ungetori EAFTren bedaratzigaren gaiurera eta ungetori Donostiara. Ore handia da niretzat, EAFTko lehendakari gisa, emenegutea eta gairone hasiera ematea. Uzeiri eskerak eman nahi nizkioke, tokiko antolatzaile izan baita honako gaironen prestatzelanetan. Peresike eman nahi nizkieke eskerak imanol urbieta eta begonia arrata adiskidei. Lan handia egin baitute gairau realitate bihurtzeko. Perek egindako lanarekiko eta perakiko pekirunez egin dut euskaraz nire itzaldarien lehen partea. Parkia nire askera. So I switch into English. I hope it was understandable. I thank my previous speakers, and I welcome you all to the 9th Terminology Summit by the EAFT, devoted to quality, among other things. So that's why I found this in my pocket when I came, and I think it was a good thing to bring for measuring. It's something about measuring quality. That's one aspect of this summit. And this autumn, I made many firsts. I felt a bit like an explorer. I was on Georgian television in Tbilisi talking about terminology. I went to Greenland, to Nuuk, and I taught terminology. And I discovered many things I didn't know. I didn't know about all the work being done in Tbilisi and in Georgia. I didn't know about all the Greenlandic terminology problems, and their language, which is also very special. It's the first time for me here in Donostia, San Sebastian, but uzei is not a new thing. That's not a first. I know this since many years, all the work that you've been doing, and therefore I think it's appropriate for me to peresiki posik sentitsen nais aurten useik pero eurte betetsen dituela erospatsen dugulako. Urti urin garantzitso honetan, zorionak eman nizkioke uzeiri hemen egin duen eta egiten ari den lan gutziarengatik. So I would like now to give a present to uzei from EAFT. So it's a 14-year. Yes, so thank you for receiving us all here in San Sebastian, and thank you for all your work. It was already mentioned. It's a very special wine from Romania. It was already mentioned by the President. You have done lots of work, especially on language technology, like the Obelix, like Idite, the Euskalterm, and many other things, not only for Basque, but also for Castilian, Spanish, and other languages. And this is inspiring to show that smaller languages do lots of work that can be reused by other. Smaller languages, minoritized, whatever you like to call them. Mine is also a small language comparatively. So we share a lot of problems. It was well put by Jon Etchabe. The funding problems, technology, the professional groups, all of this will be touched upon. And when I went to Greenland, I visited Okasilarefik, which is the Greenlandic Language Secretariat. And they have their own particular problems, and they always participate or try to participate in Nordic contexts. But I spoke to one of them, and I always felt a little separated, because geographically we're part of this region, but our language is so different. It made me think of the situation here, where Basque is very surrounded by Romance languages, but is in itself very different. And this causes special problems. There are many challenges that face us in terminology. Where are we now? What's the state of the art? What's happening? And we tried to sum this up by looking at 3 M's and 1 Q, the making, the managing, and the measuring of terminology for quality. It could mean different things. We were discussing, could you make terminology? Of course, we needed an M for the logotype, but it's something to do with the basic terminology work. Still, there are things to be done here. Are we doing it the right way? Are there new ways, new technology? Again, with terminology management, these are just a few definitions. What does this mean in private and public sector? How could this be done with quality? And how can we evaluate the results, the measuring? And there we have the terminologie. This is a French definition, where Canada has been for a long time in the lead. How do you measure the success of terms? I also visited the other week a workshop organized by Swedish Clarin, the network, where they were discussing automatic language change detection. How can you find out if language is changing, general language and terminology? And again, they were quite unaware of all the terminometric studies. And this sort of shows that we still have to come together with other linguistic disciplines and discuss even more. I thought that was interesting. This is reflected in the program of this summit. We added 5 sessions, you could say, because one repeats itself or is developed 2 times. And then, not to forget, the poster sessions. I will come back to this at the very end, but this is how we try to distribute the 3 M's and the quality for quality. It was already discussed in Budapest in 2010, where we had the thematic of quality, and this is what we said then. Are these questions still relevant? Is today's quality different from yesterday's? How can we improve terminological practices? How can we integrate a new approach to quality in our training, etc.? These were some questions. I think they are still quite relevant questions, but there are new ones, I suppose, to be dealt with. In a fairly recent book, Manuel de langue de spécialité, Teresa Cabré stated one basic quality of terminology is the principle of quality. On ne peut atteindre la qualité que si une bonne documentation est utilisée et si elle suit la méthodologie décrite. You cannot arrive at good quality unless you have good documentation and follow a good methodology, more or less. So I think this is an issue, it's always there. It was discussed also in Tbilisi, where there are a lot of terminological publications, but what is the quality of the products being produced? Terminological work is being conducted chaotically without any responsibilities. And this is another issue. We come back to the terminological responsibility. Who is responsible and for what? I used this already in 2016 in Luxembourg for the 8th summit. It was summarized very neatly, as always, I think, by the brilliant Cara Warburton, terminologist. In 2015, what were her trends? What could she see? Well, of course, the role of text was increasing. Now we work with corpora to a much larger extent than before. We accept more things as terms. The idea of termness and termhood is slightly changing. There are a bit more tools, and we have the idea of crowdsourcing. Should anyone participate in coining terms, working on terminology? We will touch upon this in one of the sessions as well. On the other hand, I still don't quite agree about the normalization aim and the role of concept being not so important anymore. It depends. We see in the Nordic countries a direction towards enterprise architecture, IT modeling, and this is the concept matter much, much more. So I would still have my doubts about this. I think it's an interesting image. I've added some more trends for myself, one being the construction of national term banks. We have them already. We have projects underway. Term being one of the examples. This is a brief map. It does not cover everything, but we have some that would be considered national, even if they're not called national by their creators. We have the very large international ones, EAFT, for example, and also Euro Term Bank. Again, we're working towards the Georgian Term Bank. That's not there yet. It might happen. The same for Greenland. They are very interested in creating a national term bank. We have the example of Struna with the whole portal being one of the most recent examples, successful ones. We already discussed it in a seminar in 2012. What is national? What does this mean? And we decided or said at least a national term bank should have a certain coverage. It should have a certain status recognized and an accessibility as open and free as possible. and any national term bank would have a very large target group, which would cause problems potentially as to user experience, interfaces, technology, etc. But I found the old slide. This is what it used to look like, the Erskalterm. It looks like this now. It's been updated. Struna, I mentioned. I give you this just to show that they look very different. They function in different ways. The technology is very often also different, custom-made, more or less, France Term. We have Terma from Ireland. We'll hear more about this later on. Terminobankas, the one that we were inspired by in Sweden, which was there for many years in Lithuania. This is the national Swedish term bank. I worked on this for many, many years. The Welsh National Terminology Portal, and the newly sort of renovated, to say, EAFT. We'll hear more about this in a while, with many new features. So these are very important tools. As I said, not all of us still have a term bank, but many see the need. It's important to store terminological material in one database. It has many, many important functions, not to say the least politically. And this is again where we come back to another issue related to this, because in Romania, I was there also recently teaching, and we were discussing there is the term Rom, but it's not being updated, and the association linked to this is not there anymore. And this is another trend, you could say, which is, well, rearrangement in the organization of terminology work, which is good or bad. It remains to be seen. We see in the Nordic countries an approach to general language in that terminology is being incorporated into larger institutions which deal with general language, minority language, and all other features of language. And we have to see if this is a good or a bad development. We have terminology work done by many other professions, not the traditional terminologist. What does this mean? What is the profession of terminologist? How will this develop? We have many organizations. This is a quite chaotic map, divided in colors in various types of associations and networks. One of the recent ones being Vukolbaridze in Georgia. Now, Termcat has made a better version, a terminology map. You can click and you can find out information about all of these networks and associations. For example, these ones. For major languages, also for many countries, Netherlands and Belgium, I forgot, should be included in NL-term. We have for smaller languages, Termbrett, Bretagne, Termigal, and uzei, of course. And we have the Nordic Språkrådet, both in Sweden and Norway, and in Iceland, where terminology is part of the whole language institution. DGLFLF in France, and the Institute of Croatian Language. Some examples only. You could make this into a typology, and we have slightly done that in the EAFT. We have associations, national centers, fewer and fewer remain, sadly, and organizations of other kinds, and then supranational networks like ourselves, and Nordterm, Riterm, Realitaire, and the Commission of Slavonic Scholars, just to mention a few. Of course, Infoterm, the president is here, Termnet. Sadly, the IITF does not exist anymore. It was closed down, the International Institute for Terminology Research. Hopefully, this will be transferred to the EAFT. This is our plan, so it won't disappear. But we see a development here where my own center, sadly, will be closed down at the end of this year after 77 years of activities. It's very sad, both in the way it was done and the idea itself that we are not supposed to have a separate center for terminology anymore. It is, however, included somehow. They're restarting it within, as I said, the General Language Council, and we'll see what happens with this. The Dun Term Center was also closed down, as was training in terminology in the Copenhagen Business School, which meant that all of these very professional colleagues were spread out. They're still working in terminology, many of them, but it's not the same anymore. We have Termrom, non-existent as an organization. How could this be reorganized? Is it possible? But on the other hand, we have smaller organizations like Okasilarifik in Greenland, or the newly formed Vukolbaridze Association for Georgian Terminology. And this development in Sweden is quite ironic because there was just a new book published on language planning where it states quite frankly, terminology work needs a center at national level. And then we close it down, so it's a bit, yeah. But let's see what happens. It's not even there yet. We still have a center until the last of December. I don't work there anymore. I quit before. I still think it's a sad, a story that's ending, but something new might come out of this anyway. This is an image from where I visited Tbilisi, one of our newest members and one of our newest associations of terminology. They also have a journal, which is very interesting, Terminological Issues. We discussed yesterday, too, with my colleagues in the board, there's a feeling of, are there fewer conferences? Are there fewer books being published? Where are we now in terminology? Is this true or not? This is just a feeling you get. The TIA in France is not there anymore. The TKE, we don't know about it. Or perhaps I'm wrong, I didn't see it for many years, but perhaps it's still there. Oh, so, okay, good. So we turn this trend around straight away. We have, of course, other conferences where LSP, TECOM, where terminology is a part, if not the main issue. It's just a feeling I've got from people that sort of, is this diminishing, or where are we? What's the state of the art now? On the other hand, we have new training, both in Portugal and in Université de Savoie. They started new training programs, really very ambitious ones, and this is a good development. We have the Terminology Summer School, perhaps bigger than ever, run by Termnet. And this is me teaching in Universitatea in Bucharest. I was there teaching, and this also showed the idea how we could cooperate also in the teaching area. I think this is a good development. We do have some journals, some blogs, the Lithuanian Terminologia, Terminological Issues, Terminology, the IITF journal, which disappears, but will hopefully reappear quite soon. We have newsletters, we have bloggers like Patricia Brenes and Licia Carbolante and others in my own terms, for example. She spoke at the last summit. And there's this, sorry? Yeah, of course, Term Cord. And then there was a new book published this year, a manual for language for special purposes. And in the preface, John Humbly, terminologist since many, many years, he also stresses the fact that terminology and LSP come closer to general linguistics. So the situation has changed and we get new tools, especially corpora. So to contradict myself, there are quite a few new books and some new tools. The revamped EAFT and also the fairly recent book on Terminologie management, a German book by Petra Drewer and Klaus Digschmitz. So perhaps we shouldn't be so worried after all. There are books being published. We have the Handbook of Terminology, which is also quite recent. And what about the profession? I will come back to this at the end of the summit. What is the terminologist? Who is the terminologist now? We have a specific session on this topic as well. But we see this, especially in the Nordic countries, other professions doing terminology work. It's not exactly the same. It's more ontology-based. It has to do with structuring of knowledge, IT systems, but working both in public and private sectors. And they have the same needs, and we will have one speech about how this cooperation could be done. So, but who is responsible? This is another issue we've had at the summit. Of course, states and governments, the challenge of getting funded. Rearrangements, all of a sudden, moving of centers. This is tricky to control, but there's a responsibility at state level, of course. There's a responsibility for terminologists themselves. How do we improve? How do we measure our success? But also for the terminology organizations. Ourselves, what do we do? What is our responsibility? Just to present a few activities that are being done, there are several organizations and networks. They organize every year a symposium or a particular day on terminology, a convention, colloquia. Just a few examples. There are magazines, journals, being published, and there are training opportunities. So we are taking responsibility. Just in case someone here is new to the EAFT, I'll say a few words about our own association, of which you are members. We want to be the umbrella organization for terminology associations of various kinds, also for individuals and networks. And we interpret Europe very broadly. It's not to be interpreted as the European Union only. And we have agreements with many other associations. These are my current board colleagues. We are all here. You can speak to them in the break. Sorry, Anna, because I've just found the image where you are on the screen. You were participating online. And we have had a fruitful 2 years working together. So I thank you here, all of you, for all your work. The objectives, similar to the ones presented by John for uzei, to further plurilingualism, to be a platform, and to create liaisons with other organizations, among other things. The summit being one of the main activities. Now we're at the 9th. There was also a pre-summit in Brussels before. And finally, I have a preprint copy of the much-awaited proceedings, thanks to Tom Cord and Valentina. So there will be a proper print with time, and it's already available online. And we apologize for the delay in publishing this, but it's an interesting publication. Back to the present, back to now. We're now here in San Sebastian, and we have the 6 very exciting sessions. I'm looking forward to this a lot. More about this in a minute. We also do workshops. The last one was in 2016 in Copenhagen, terminology teaching and training. Already in 2006, we did concept modeling and ontology in Vasa. So we've done a lot of things. We hope to repeat the term intra, the seminar on national term banks. I think it's very much needed. We give out, so tomorrow morning, the president of the jury, Anka Veliko, will present the winner and the International Terminology Awards, which are currently 2 awards to be given out this year. One of them will be given out, and the winner will be here, I hope, tomorrow to accept it. So this is the idea to promote research. So there's a 2 level, one on a PhD level and one on a master level. And you have the jury members here. We have agreements, we have a newsletter, you know all of this, and we have also special interest groups. The agreements with various kinds of organizations, also publishing houses, to try to achieve better deals for our members. The interest groups, I think this is very exciting. I want to move forward with this. One on teaching and training, a new one on research, where we're supposed to take over where the IITF disappeared, to focus on research. There's also interest from the project, you will hear more about this in the poster by Asta from Lithuania, the e-translation term bank project, which could perhaps continue in a special interest group devoted to resources. Tatiana Gornostaya, she couldn't come, sadly, but Asta is here to talk about this poster. And we have the website. That is being slightly revamped. It's been annoying, I know, with all the menus, but we're trying to fix it, to make it better. And then just I found a new quote, again, this autumn when I discovered things. I discovered Vukol Beridze. No branch, no subject can exist without terminology. It is simply impossible. A good quote again from a Georgian terminologist. Là, pour terminer, donc, je vais parler de comment ça va se passer. Les différentes sessions. Il y en a 6. Donc, en réalité, c'est 5 parce qu'il y en a la même thématique qui revient. Et il y a les posters qui seront présentés là, à l'extérieur. Donc, il ne faut pas rater, je vous dis. Il faut être vraiment il faut prendre son café et regarder avec, parce qu'il y a des choses très intéressantes à voir. Et il y a 3 sessions. Donc là, la première, entre 9h moins le quart, à 2h, vous avez les 6, là. Et après, 3h à 6h30, il y en a encore 6 autres. Et demain, il y aura encore entre 9h moins le quart et 2h. Je vous laisse regarder encore. C'est vraiment très impressionnant. Donc aussi la gamme des sujets et aussi l'aspect géographique, très important. Donc je vous invite tous à regarder tous les posters. Je vous invite aussi, si vous voulez, si on est membre ou pas. Donc, on peut participer à l'Assemblée générale. On a juste 1 heure parce qu'après, il y a la promenade en ville, le découvert de Saint-Sébastien et la langue basque. Mais je vous invite quand même il y a les élections, il y a d'autres choses à discuter, il y a des propositions très intéressantes. Et donc, les documents sont déjà en ligne, si vous voulez les consulter. Et il y a aussi des choses, des activités sociales. Donc là, ce soir, on a les premiers pas en langue basque. Je les ai déjà pris, je suis content. J'ai parlé en basque. Mais on va terminer à Etchepare Basque Institute, where we will learn more. On va apprendre plus sur le basque. Et il y a le dîner à 9h, donc ce soir. Ça, c'est tout. Je tiens aussi à remercier tous les sponsors, DGLFLF, la délégation générale des langues de français et des langues de France, aussi les organismes basques qui nous ont support, qui ont donné le support, et surtout, encore une fois, à Iman Orbieta et à Begonia Arrate pour tout votre travail. Merci. Et avec ça, je déklare le som är ouvert. Då passar jag på att också prata svenska. Eftersom det är ett flerspråkigt evenemang så vill jag alltid göra det. Så jag hälsar er alla välkomna till den 9:e världskonferensen i terminologi. Tack.